Hi, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I wanted to quickly put this video up just because I am starting this series on Lenormand, and so that anybody who is perhaps coming to these videos new and is looking for different sets or decks to get, I wanted to make sure we have some options. The other set of book and cards that I recommend would be the Celtic Lenormand, and I have a review of that up already, and I will put a link to that in the description box below. But I do highly recommend this set of cards and books. Truthfully, not so much for the cards as for the book that's involved. If you already have a deck of cards but are looking for a specific book, Caitlin Matthews, who did this set, also went on after this to flesh out the book that comes with this into a full book that's called The Complete Lenormand, and I also do recommend that book. So what we're looking at today is the box set that's called the Enchanted Lenormand Oracle, Divination Cards for Clarity and Guidance by Caitlin Matthews, and the artwork is by Virginia Lee. But it comes in this hard box. I like the sturdy box, but it's quite large. It's not something that I would actually keep things in just because I don't really do that, but it is a very sturdy box, and it comes with a nice little design like this. You pull the lid off, and here in the front we have the set of cards, which we will look at in a moment, and we have the book, which I think is the star of this particular set. So again, we'll also look at that, and then it also comes with a paper insert that has let's see, you're not going to be able to see it all, but I'll see if I can open this up. Here we have the Grand Tableau, and this is done in the 9x4 Grand Tableau. As I've said in another video where I brought this out, I don't find, well, I'll just put this to the side because I'm not going to get it redone. I don't find those particular inserts to be that useful because A, they just don't really lay flat. That doesn't have the house names on it, so I don't think it's all that helpful to a beginner without the house names on the cards themselves. And so it's just not something that I would particularly use, but that is part of the kit. So I'm going to set this over here out of the way. And first we'll take a look at the book, because I do think that the book in this set really shines, and it's one of the reasons that I would highly recommend this deck. It's one of those nice books that has that soft matte feel that I think lots of us do appreciate in guidebooks. It is in color. It has color images. Whenever there is an image of the card, it is in color, which is a nice touch that I quite love. We've got a table of contents here, of course. We have a section that sort of just goes over an overview of Lenormand and you know, how it's composed, how it works, the different, you know, just sort of basics about it. We also then have a section on learning the art of Lenormand, and she kind of uses it as a story of adding, you know, 9 cards and 9 cards and 9 cards in, because again, she's going, I think, off the 9x4 grid. And then we have a section about significators and how they work, about framing your question correctly, the language of Lenormand. This is a quite useful section, I think, because it talks about different ways of reading, because we don't read Lenormand with a single card. We read it in sets of 2s or 3s. So it talks about pairing them. It talks about forward narrative, where we read, you know, straight through from 1, 2, 3. The opening triplet, the middle triplet, the end triplet. This I thought was quite a helpful. Now she says you'll generally use 1 and 2 the most, the pairing and the forward narrative. narrative. I actually use quite a lot with the middle triplet, where the middle card of a triplet is sort of the focus. You'll sort of come to see what resonates and works with you, but I really do like how this is quite well explained there. And then she goes on to give some more examples of how you would actually do that. So I do, again, I appreciate how this is set up. We have sort of an overview of what's going on in the basic options, and then she gives more in-depth with actual examples of how to do that. She also talks about counting pips and how you can use the pips or the actual little card inserts. I haven't really gone over that in our series yet, but that is also there, which is nice. This deck does include a extra card, which is called the Diviner card. So that's basically you as the reader. And so that's an extra card that you can leave in or you can take out. And she kind of goes over, because that's not a card that typically goes with Lenormand, she kind of goes how she sees you being able to use that. And then she gives a nice little key, so how, because following is going to be all the different, each of the cards, 2 pages covering each of the card. So she goes through a little sort of key on what these things might mean. Again, I really like the setup. Her setup is fantastic. So she gives us a sort of an overview of what she's going to be doing, and then she does it. I really like this. So on each of the cards, of the 36 cards, well, 37 in this deck because of the last card, but in each of the cards she's going to have an impact, which is, I love. It's that sort of, give us the nutshell of this card. What is, and she talks about this as the dynamic impact of each card with a few keywords. Then she's going to have a list of many different ways, keywords that can be put into it, the people this could be associated with, love associations, work associations, finance and business association, well-being associations, comparing them to other cards, the playing card. So if there is a it's like a mnemonic to remember the playing card that goes with it. And then in the back of the back of the book, she has the full rhyme in order to memorize the cards and how they relate. So that's a nice little thing there. And then the main themes of the image that we find in story or folklore or myth, the sort of the archetypal energy of the card. Love this section. And then some selected combinations. So that's how, so she tells us how it's going to be laid out, and then each card is laid out that way across 2 pages. Along the top we have the 4 suits, and then it's highlighted or bolded out which is the suit we're actually talking about. We have the number, the name, and then the playing card that it's associated with, and then all of those things that we just discussed are talked about for each of the cards across 2 pages. And then we have a color insert of the image. I just think this is a fantastic layout. Let's go back here to the Diviner. So the Diviner is all suits. It doesn't have a specific suit, and on the little playing card insert just sort of shows a card backing with all the suits. So this talks about how this is a non-traditional extra card, and that it represents Marianne Lenormand herself. So I think that's great. And so she talks about divination being a snapshots of conditions that we see being projected from the present moment, but it's not the entire picture. And so the Diviner offers truth and guidance, so that you can use the consultant feature of this card. When this card appears in a lineup, listen more deeply to what is being suggested and test it out before you accept the messages. Then it says further uses of this card are suggested on page 32 and 33, and that's where we saw back here where she gives us some ideas of how we could use this particular card. But she goes through and does the same thing, where the impact of this card is something that's essential, truthful, holistic, consultative, diagnostic. I really actually like this card, and I'm tempted to put this in, perhaps not when I'm doing a grand tableau, because that's going to throw off the numbers, which would probably bother me. Because it, it's going to throw the houses off. But I can definitely see using this card in certain situations. Then she goes into some spreads, and she has, she again gives us the example and explains how everything's going to work, and then she does an actual example with a colored of the actual reading with the actual cards in it, and then an explanation on how you might read that. So I think this is really useful. And here's another spread, opening the book spread, and this is talking about ways to read that particular spread. The encounter spread. These are not what would be traditional spreads. That she's kind of giving us some extra ones, because typically with Lenormand you'll see a 3-card spread, a 9-card spread, sometimes a 5-card line spread, then of course the grand tableau. But she's definitely giving us a variety of different spreads as well as those typical ones. Then she does the big picture or the grand tableau, and again she does it in the 9x4 setup, and gives a nice graph here showing how, okay, if this is the line of the significator, then this is the present. Everything behind is going to be the past. Everything to the forward is going to be the future. We also have conscious above and unconscious below. She doesn't mention that particularly. And then sort of how to grab out the sets of 9 that are in the grand tableau, how to do some knighting. So she goes into quite in-depth in how to read this, how to count out the cards to reduce a grand tableau down to 9 cards that are very specific. Mirroring. So we do get into some more advanced aspects of the grand tableau, which is quite nice. And then this goes into more, again, with the specific playing card messages. So that's, I got a section on that, which is really fantastic. Timing, a section about timing, because timing is really difficult to get down a lot of times. And then also a very thorough look at each of the cards and what they might tell us about timing. And she also explains the fact that when your topic card lands on a house 1 to 2 positions away from the significator, you read the house as near. If it's 3 or more, then it would be read as far. So then each one, so rider, the near would be speedy or twilight, and far would be months away. So how far away it is from a significator card is very important in Lenormand, and so she covers that. So I just think, and then again we have the playing card rhyme, some meanings at a glance. Like, how fantastic is that? And so, we have it for each card here, but then she also gives us sort of just the keywords in here if you're just wanting to get to the nuts and bolts. And then of course her bibliography. So I think this is a fantastic resource, and I really highly recommend this. Again, I do have the complete Lenormand book by Caitlin Matthews. It's on my Kindle, or it's actually on my iPad. So I particularly appreciate having sort of this condensed version of that as a physical copy. So that works well for me. But I think the size is fantastic, and it packs a lot of information and very well laid out. So I can't speak highly enough of this particular guidebook and the way that it's set up. I think it's amazing, and I really do recommend this kit for especially for a beginner, because it really does, I think, have everything you need for a good start into Lenormand. So there we have that. Now the cards themselves are to me not the highlight of the piece. I mean, I like them, but they're not, I think it's worth it just for the book alone. But let me make sure. Let me zoom in now a little bit. Let's get a little bit of a zoom in here. That might be too much of a zoom in. There we go. So the backs of the cards look like this. Size-wise, They are actually quite a nice size. They're a little bit smaller than an average playing card, which would be an average Lenormand size. But obviously they are much bigger than a mini card. So they're sort of in between a regular Lenormand and a mini deck of Lenormand. I think anything to make a deck of Lenormand cards more compact is something that is a positive thing for when you're laying out a grand tableau. So I really appreciate that. The backs have sort of this wood and ivy and clover, and then there are the heart, an arrowhead, a diamond, and a clover that are right here. So I suppose that would be for hearts and clubs and spades and diamonds. So I think that's quite a sweet backing. I think that these can be considered busy cards, again, when you compare it just to a standard traditional Lenormand. These can be quite busy with all of that going on, the trees and the ivy and then the corner things here. It can kind of be busy. And we do have the playing card insert, and then we have the card number down here at the bottom. However, I will say that despite the busy nature of it, the images themselves, because they are seen through a crystal ball, really do pop out. You don't have to really look hard to find out what the image is, because it has it standing out like that. It is a little bit, I've heard people say, well, it's a little bit on the darker side. It is slightly on the dark side, and it has sort of a softened look to the image inside because you're kind of seeing it through a crystal ball. But I think it's quite clear what the images are, irregardless of that. I really like that we have the full card insert. That's very important to me in Lenormand, and so I think that it works. The stock is, I've heard the biggest complaint about this deck is that the card stock is so thick. And it is definitely thicker than like an average playing card. So I don't believe that you can rifle shuffle this. I've heard that you can kind of mess your cards up because A, they're smaller, so you don't have as much space to bend, and then B, they're thicker, that you can really mess your cards up or bend them if you try to rifle shuffle them. Now, I am a rifle shuffler, but I think these are a deck of cards you're just going to want to overhand shuffle. So to me, that's fine. You just, as long as you're aware of that, you just kind of work with it as it goes. It does have a sheen to them, or a gloss, which you can probably see, but it's not horribly so. I definitely have worse deck of cards like my Handle Tarot. So let's go through these cards real quickly. Here we have the Rider, the Clover, and you can see with this one here we have the ship, that it really is supposed to look like you're looking in a crystal ball, because the images are rounded as if you're seeing them through the prism of the glass, which I quite like that touch. Here we have ship, house. I love this. It's like a little cottage in the woods. And I love, see how the card insert is like a full real card, a playing card. I love that. So then we have the tree. I love the face in the tree. Hopefully you can see that. Here we have the clouds, and we have the light side, and we have the sad dark side down here. We have the snake, the coffin, kind of in a graveyard, the bouquet, the scythe. Here we have a broom, or the rod, so the whip, so here we have a broom. Birds. I like that there's two. Child. The fox, you can see in this one that rounding off too. I quite like that. The bear. And these are, as you can see, they are softened because, again, we're looking, to me it works. That's a complaint that people have. To me it works. We're looking at it through a crystal ball, and so it's not going to be in sharp clarity. It kind of has a watercolor storybook feel to it, in my opinion. I love this stars. It's like a constellation of a woman, and she's holding like a ball in her hand. I love that. I really like that card. Stork. Dog. And I like you have the dog here, but then you also have some dogs kind of playing in the background. The tower. Seems like Rapunzel's tower. I have to say that looking through these, a lot of the songs from Into the Woods is running through my mind. Because you know me in musicals. Things are running through my brain. The garden. Mountains. I love this mountain. There's a bird overhead, and you know you can get the sense that you can get around it. It's just going to take a while. Here we have paths. I always like the ones that have bridges, and they definitely need to have the split in the road. Here we have mice. I like the hearts with the ivy. Ring. See, again, it's very clearly a ring, so while we do have a busier card, it's quite clear what the image is. Here we have a book, letter. Now when we get to so we have two men, so you can see this. Here we have two men. We have a choice of a light skin and dark skin, or even just a different cloak. They are facing the same direction, and they're kind of in the same position in terms of they have the cane right there, and the way the buildings are. It's really just a difference in skin tone here, and the colors of the cloaks, so you can kind of pick whichever one you want. And then the same thing with the women, because that way, because sometimes people use it so that when you're reading, they're facing each other. Just depending, the way that they're facing is important. So those will match up regardless of which one you choose to use. And then again, this also gives you the option for same-sex relationships to put in two women or two men and be able to use that. So I do like to have those choices. You would just pick one of each of those that you particularly like. Then here you have the lilies card. I always like my lilies to be white, so I appreciate that. The sun, quite beautiful sun. The moon. See, again, they're very, very clear despite the busy nature of the surroundings. Key. It's a beautiful keyhole door. There's like a woman back here, and then there's a keyhole, but the key stands out as being the most important thing. We have fish. I like that there's multiple fish. A lot of people do like that rather than just one fish, even though we have one fish as central. The anchor. Now this would be the only change. Instead of, well, in the next card, but instead of the cross, we have the crossing. And I want to say, let's look it up real quick, but the crossing is staying the same as the idea of the cross. So we still have that idea of fate. We still have the idea of burdens and heaviness, and something that's inevitable. So we have the same thing. And she talks about, traditionally called the cross, the crossing represents all spiritual paths. So she kind of changed it because the cross itself is very symbolic in the Christian faith. And so she felt like that the crossing it just makes it the same connotations to the card, but it removes it from being a very specific religion. But anyways, I quite like that change. I think that's great. And then we have the diviner card that is added in. And again, you can either keep this in or you can take this out to keep with your 36 card traditional set. And she does have a specific, this is number 37, and she does have description in the guidebook on how to use this card if you choose to use it. But I do like the addition of it because again, you can choose to use it or not, but I think it's quite neat aspect of it. Now, I'm not going to, oh, see, I'm so bad, as I said, of shuffling with the tripod in front of me. Oh, and I should have taken, I'll have to go through and take out my man cards. So they are thick, I will say, because most of my Lenormand cards are sort of the feel of a playing card, so they feel a little more awkward than normal just because they're thicker, but they slide quite nicely. I think they're going to shuffle well, especially once they break. I know I'm not giving a good example of that, but again, I'm really bad at shuffling with the tripod. I'm not going to try to rifle shuffle them. Well, although I prefer to rifle shuffle, no, they're very, very firm. I think you definitely would bend it, so I don't think that that's the good idea. But I think once they do have a nice slippiness to it, and I think once I get used to it, you're going to be able to overhand shuffle it just fine. So they are thick. I mean, that is something that's brought up with them, and it's certainly something to note that they are thick like that, but I don't think that is going to take away from being able to really use them. I'm just going through and pulling these out so that this one I will may use at some point. I'm going to use those two. I switch up when I have decks that have multiple choices. I'll use this two for a while, and then sometimes I switch them up to something else. I want to get tired of I like the pink. She's in purple, which is pretty. I just kind of switch them up just however I feel like using them. So then I'll just set those aside, and I have my 36 cards. So I think this is a great set again, especially for the book. I think this is well worth it, especially for a beginner and just for anybody. It's a great resource, and it is it's just a nice set. So I highly recommend it, and I hope this was helpful, and have a lovely day.